Imagine an AI system that can predict wars before they begin. Not science fiction, it's happening right now, and it's targeting the hidden battleground that could determine America's future, the race for critical minerals. The Pentagon has deployed artificial intelligence to forecast conflicts over the metals that power everything from your smartphone to F-35 fighter jets. This isn't about oil anymore, it's about lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements that China controls like a strategic chokehold. Here's what most Americans don't realize. The United States is completely dependent on imports for 12 out of 50 critical minerals essential to national security. China doesn't just mine these materials, they control up to 90% of the global processing capacity. That means Beijing can essentially turn off the supply chain for American technology and defense systems at will. The Pentagon's response? A revolutionary AI program called Open Price Exploration for National Security. This system processes over 70 datasets, from satellite imagery monitoring mining operations in remote regions to social media chatter that might signal labor unrest. The AI doesn't just predict prices, it forecasts which regions are most likely to erupt into resource-driven conflicts. This technology emerged from a harsh reality check. When COVID-19 hit, supply chains collapsed almost overnight. Semiconductor shortages shut down auto plants from Detroit to Texas. Then came the Russia-Ukraine war, which disrupted everything, from semiconductor production to fertilizer supplies. American policymakers realized that the next conflict might not be fought with tanks and missiles, it could be won by whoever controls the supply of critical minerals. The technology is already proving its worth. Between 2021 and 2023 alone, there were 334 incidents of violence or protests linked to mining copper, cobalt, lithium, and nickel in the top producing countries. Most Americans never heard about these conflicts, but each one sends ripples through global supply chains that eventually reach American factories and consumers. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo, which produces 80% of the world's cobalt, essential for electric vehicle batteries. The region has seen decades of what experts call mineral wars, where armed groups fight for control of mining territories. Chinese companies now control 80% of Congo's cobalt output, giving Beijing unprecedented leverage over the global transition to clean energy. Every Tesla, every iPhone, every piece of green technology depends on minerals flowing through these conflict zones. The human stories behind these statistics are devastating. Artisanal miners, including children, work in hand-dug tunnels without safety equipment to extract cobalt that ends up in American consumer electronics. Environmental activists report mercury contamination in mining sites that poisons local water supplies. Indigenous communities lose access to ancestral lands as mining operations expand. Workers toil in dangerous conditions for wages of less than $2 per day, while the minerals they extract power devices worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The AI system uses machine learning to identify patterns that human analysts might miss. It can spot when a mining region is becoming politically unstable, when environmental protests are likely to shut down operations, or when geopolitical tensions might trigger export restrictions. The goal isn't just to predict disruptions, it's to prevent them through diplomatic intervention and strategic resource planning. Consider what happened in 2024 when the M23 rebel group seized control of Rubaya, Congo's largest coltan producer. The AI system had flagged increasing tensions in the region weeks before the takeover. Coltan is essential for manufacturing capacitors used in every electronic device. When M23 took control, global prices spiked 40% overnight. American tech companies scrambled to secure alternative sources, but there are precious few alternatives when one region controls half of global production. What makes this particularly critical for American interests is the concentration of these materials in politically unstable regions. Lithium comes primarily from the Lithium Triangle between Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina, where water-intensive extraction methods have sparked protests from indigenous communities. Rare earth elements are overwhelmingly controlled by China, which has used export restrictions as a diplomatic weapon.
Cobalt flows through conflict zones in Central Africa, where armed groups use mining revenues to finance operations. This geographic concentration creates what military strategists call single points of failure in America's technological infrastructure. China's strategy has been decades in the making. While American companies focused on quarterly profits and environmental regulations made domestic mining expensive, Beijing invested in long-term control of mineral supply chains. They built processing facilities, acquired mining rights, and developed relationships with resource-rich nations, often through Belt and Road Initiative investments. The result is a strategic chokehold that China demonstrated when it restricted rare earth exports to Japan in 2010 following a territorial dispute, and again when it imposed export controls on 7 critical elements in response to American tariffs in 2025. The economic implications are staggering. The global critical minerals market has already reached $320 billion and is expected to double by 2030 as demand for electric vehicles and renewable energy explodes. But unlike traditional commodities, such as oil or wheat, these materials can't be easily substituted. There's no alternative to lithium for advanced batteries, no replacement for certain rare earth elements in precision-guided weapons. When supply chains break down, entire industries can grind to a halt within weeks. The Pentagon's AI system has achieved something remarkable: 95% accuracy in predicting conflict scenarios. It can forecast not just where violence might erupt, but how supply chain disruptions will cascade through the global economy. This capability represents a fundamental shift from reactive crisis management to proactive conflict prevention. The system cost $4.5 million to develop through a contract with Charles River Analytics, but the potential savings from preventing supply chain disruptions could reach billions. The system integrates multiple types of intelligence using advanced machine learning algorithms. Satellite imagery reveals changes in mining operations, infrastructure development, and troop movements around key facilities. Economic data tracks price volatility and trade flows that might signal market manipulation or supply constraints. Social media monitoring captures local sentiment and early warning signs of unrest in mining communities. Environmental sensors detect pollution levels that might trigger community protests or regulatory shutdowns. Weather data helps predict natural disasters that could disrupt operations. All of this information feeds into predictive models that identify patterns invisible to human analysts. But the technology raises uncomfortable questions about America's strategic vulnerabilities. The fact that we need AI to predict mineral wars highlights how dependent we've become on unstable regions and potentially hostile nations. China's dominance isn't accidental. It's the result of decades of strategic planning while American policymakers focused elsewhere.
Beijing understood early that whoever controls the materials needed for advanced technology would hold tremendous power in the 21st century. The geopolitical implications extend far beyond economics. Nations that control critical mineral supply chains wield influence comparable to oil-producing countries in the 20th century. China has already used this leverage, restricting exports when diplomatic tensions rise. As demand for clean energy technologies explodes, driven by climate commitments and the need to compete with China in emerging industries, this mineral diplomacy will become even more powerful. American companies are beginning to respond, but progress is slow. Tesla is investing in lithium processing facilities in Texas. Apple is exploring recycling programs to reduce dependence on new mining. Ford has signed deals with Indonesian nickel producers to secure battery materials. The Department of Defense is stockpiling critical materials through the National Defense Stockpile. But these efforts pale in comparison to the scale of the challenge. Building domestic supply chains takes decades, and the environmental and regulatory hurdles are immense. The AI system represents more than just prediction. It's America's attempt to regain strategic initiative in a competition that will define the 21st century. The question isn't whether mineral conflicts will happen, but whether the United States can position itself to navigate them successfully.
This technology gives American policymakers and business leaders advance warning to diversify suppliers, build strategic reserves, and engage in preventative diplomacy before crises explode into open conflicts. The race for critical minerals is reshaping global power dynamics in ways most Americans don't yet understand. China's control over these supply chains gives them leverage that goes far beyond traditional economic competition. It's a form of technological sovereignty that could determine which nation leads in the 21st century. The Pentagon's AI system represents America's attempt to regain strategic initiative in a competition that will define the 21st century. But prediction is only the first step. The real question is whether the United States can build the domestic capacity and international partnerships needed to break free from this dangerous dependence before it's too late.